happy. That was not awful.
It's not awful.
Maybe I'll get one of those slidey vinyl things.
That you put
Like
on the
an
shelf?
accordion?
Yeah. What's that? Who's recording us?
You know, I was testing it and I forgot that I was live. Alright, well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Michael here. Welcome back to part 4 of Felicity's rebuild. Currently rebuilding our Cessna 172 Foxtrot. When we finished up part 3, after several trials and errors, I finally developed a door frame that integrated the window frame that accommodated the size and dimensions that we needed to maintain for accuracy of the fuselage itself. So I did a lot of work off camera, a lot of trial and error over the last several days between part 3 and part 4, and I figured instead of dragging you along through all the trial and error, I would just go ahead and do it and then break down for you what it is that I did. And that saves a lot of time on the camera, it saves a lot of your time. So all of that being said, we'll go ahead and talk about the roof. The roof frame is very simple. We're still using our 2x2 pine boards. It's just a square board, and yeah, I developed a square, and then I made a couple cross boards that went across the top. Now I went ahead and added a secondary webcam over to the airframe, so I'm gonna bring that one up, and then I'll kind of break down step by step how the roof is framed and how I attached it to the sides and the front of the cabin there. So let me see if I get this to work correctly here. Technical difficulties. I don't think anybody even heard me during that last segment here. Tell you what, I need to add another audio source to that other camera, so I do apologize for that total amount of quietness you all received there. Okay, now hopefully everyone can hear me correctly as I'm explaining things out. So we'll try this again. Our roof, screw down into here, screw down into here, and a screw down into here. And effectively what that did is that tied the roof to the front, the top of the door frame, and the back, adding a bit more rigidity. If I, went on this side of the seam, the roof wouldn't have tied into here. I don't know if it would have made or break anything, but to me it made sense to use, to contact all three different points of the door frame for rigidity purposes. And again, it's just 4 pieces of 2x2. And I ran it directly on top of the door frame, or the door frames. And then I finished it off with some 1x4 pine here, just to kind of encapsulate it. I've got one there, and then we've got one here on the front. Sorry, didn't mean to drop you there. Okay, so the reason I did it like that is, again, I want this thing to be modular, in a modular fashion, to where I can assemble it, disassemble it all by myself, relatively quickly. So by encapsulating the ends there at the front and rear, that just kind of helps me line everything up, so to speak. It helps square everything together. If I didn't have those ends on there, I'm sure it would be fine, but then I'd have to, it's just easier to keep everything square and center if you have an extra set of hands holding it there, which is essentially what I put those ends on the roof board for. So now we have, if we're looking at the profile here, which we'll just go back here, if we're looking at the profile here, we have a wall. This is our fuselage, and then we have a wall. There's our fuselage. And then, because when I take this roof off, as square as I try to make everything, it just kind of goes whichever way it wants to. I mean, it's still mostly vertical, but the roof kind of ties everything together, brings everything up tight. And I think the other benefit that I like about that facet is that it just kind of gives a, if you're in the actual plane, you kind of have this headroom up here. It's above the windscreen. So that's where I'm at with the roof. So that being said, we will move right along to the windows. Now, at the end of part 3, I had just gotten the window frames framed out and our door frames framed out into one integral unit. So again, we have our 32-inch display. That's our window. And we discussed how we were going to mount these windows into our door frame, and those low profile monitor mounts did show up, and I will quickly show you the process I used to kind of reverse mount these displays. Remember, typically we would mount the bracket to the wall, then mount the thing to the display, and then hang the display onto the wall. You know, that doesn't work in this case because my display is completely framed, so I can't move it up or down once it's inside of that frame there. So the way we did that, and we'll go back over here to the other camera. I'll open the door here to kind of get a profile. So here we have a profile of the door. And this is our window and our window frame that we framed out. Okay. What I did was I mounted the bracket to the monitor. Okay. I mounted the wall bracket to this crossboard here. I then attached the monitor to this crossboard. At that point, I was able to slide the whole assembly into the frame here. And what I had to do, we'll go back to a profile here, is determine a shim thickness to where when I screwed it in, the front of the display would match the front of our door. And what's going to happen is when we go to do the interior door panels, this whole area is going to be covered, and it's just going to look like a window right there in the door. Left and right windows are installed and mounted. Yeah. That process went relatively straightforward, a bit easier than I expected it to be. So that's where I'm at with that. We got the roof, we got the windows installed. I think it's time we move along to the instrument panel. And now that in and of itself is a lot of trial and error as well. So I went ahead and did most of that earlier. And I'll go ahead and show you what I have currently. And then we'll kind of be all caught up and have to figure out where we need to go from here. So, but I'll explain real quick what we have. This is the beginning of our instrument panel. I went ahead and marked everything and did the cutouts. Now, I'm fortunate to have had the templates pre-existing from my previous version of the simulator. But just about every manufacturer has a template and or cutout diagram available to mount their instrumentation into your panel. I go with birch for my instrument panel. I feel like birch, in my experience, does not splinter and does not crack as easily as a lot of other woods do. Especially when there's a lot of intricate and finite work you have going on with the wood. And I say that in particular with my instrument, my steam panel. My steam panel relies on a 22-inch monitor, and it actually resides here inside of this instrument panel. and that's this cutout that you see here. And what I ended up doing, and I did this in the same fashion as I did my first one. It's tight. It's a very tight. In order for me to make things work the way I need it to work, my monitor needs to be as high as possible and all the way over to the left as possible. So it's a very tight, you can kind of see the corner here, radius. And in order to make that happen without damaging your wood product is to sandwich it together with another piece. So the way I did this is I made my cutout for my monitor here. That's the first thing I did. That's when this was all perfectly square. That's the first thing I did was cut this out and make sure that the display would fit. And then once I ensured that the display fit into the opening, I took a scrap bit of birch and I glued it and screwed it to the back of the primary panel. All this is doing, this is going to add a secondary layer of wood to cut your corner out, because you're literally cutting your corner that your display is going into. And I don't know if you can actually see that there, but that's what I mean how tight it is to the radius here, because the top corner of my display is going to be kind of pointing right there. But I need to do that in order to get enough real estate across across the instrument panel to accommodate everything. The other thing that I've learned is that no matter what combination I use, the panel is going to be 2 inches taller than the actual instrument panel. There's no way I can get around that, and that's only because I cannot stick a yoke shaft through the monitor. So I need to lift that instrument panel up, because in order for me to have my throttle or my primer in the exact spot it needs to be, and my magneto switch in the exact spot it needs to be, and my carb heat in the exact spot it needs to be, and my throttle in the exact spot it needs to be. In order for all of that to happen, okay, this line needs to be X amount of inches above the floor, which I'll go. It's 21 3/4. Okay. So I couldn't shrink this down. So that's going to be the caveat. I could have either sacrificed to have the top of the glare shield, the top line accurate, but then it's going to put all of our controls and everything below where they would be in the real world. So imagine in my scenario here, it's going to be okay, everything below is going to be where it needs to be. The only issue is now glare shield's going to be 2 inches higher, so we're losing 2 inches of line of sight there. But I think that'll be alright, because at the end of the day, this is still a shorter panel than the previous version, and I didn't have any issues with visibility then. It's gonna throw off my, as accurate as possible, but it's still only 2 inches. So all of that being said, let's go ahead and fit this panel up onto the panel support. We'll go ahead and get some controls in here. We'll get some things mounted up, we'll see how things look like. We'll get our steam panel screwed onto here so that we know how much real estate that we have to work with over here. So I'm going to bring up the other camera and then we'll head over to the airframe and get this thing bolted in there. All right. Now I've already pre-drilled and marked these, so it's just going to be a matter of me putting this panel right back up here. Well, might help if I flipped it around the right way. That looks better. Okay. Panel is screwed up. Well, it's screwed into position. And we can confirm now that from the floor to the bottom of the panel, 19.5 inches. And that's what we need. We need 19.5 inches from the floor to the bottom of the panel. In reality, the panel is only 17.5 inches tall, but we're at 19.25. So we're 1.75 inches taller than the actual 172 Foxtrot panel. That's just something that I'm gonna have to deal with. Okay, that's in there, that's in there. Let's go ahead and fit our yokes into place. I'm just going to set them in there. I'm not going to screw them down or anything because all of this is going to have to come back down for paint. But I do need to ensure everything is going to fit properly. So, and the way I do this, the way I mount these yokes to where it looks like it's behind the panel, but without disassembling the yoke, is I'll make an opening and then I'll drop the yoke shaft down in, and then I'll come down from the top and kind of sandwich it in so that the opening is, it just looks like a hole. Let's go ahead and throw this one in here. Alright, and we'll throw this one in here. Sort of like that. And then again, we can confirm that our yokes are 18.5 inches apart, and then the yoke shaft is 26.5 inches up from the bottom. And those are the measurements that we want for realistic feel. You know, by all said and done, you know, when I'm sitting in this thing, I want it to feel like I'm sitting in the plane as far as where the throttle is, where the fuel selector is, and then, so yeah, I'm excited to see how everything works out in the end. I really am, but I also know if it's going to be still a bit of a process yet. So, yokes. Alright, let's go ahead and grab, well, yeah, let's grab the monitor. We'll throw the monitor in here, and I'll discuss a little bit about that particular display first. Hey babe, hope you're doing well. I do get a lot of questions about what monitor I use behind my Steam panel. This is an HP, it's a 22-inch HP LCD display. It is very, very thin. The actual display part is less than a 1/4 inch. The guts of it, yeah, you've probably got 1 inch of depth right here. But it's a very, very thin display. Couldn't even tell you. Let's see. HP 22ER Echo Romeo, 21.5 inch display. But the model number is a 22 Echo Romeo. I picked this up at Micro Center a few years back when I first did the Steam panel, and it's worked pretty good. So let's go ahead and throw this in, and we will mount up some of the other switches and whatnot and see how much real estate we have to work with to the right side of the instrument panel to add the radios and G5s, because as I said in the part 3, maybe it was in part 2, but everything in our instrument panel has to kind of evolve around our Steam panel, because the Steam panel is that was a project in and of itself, and I'm not really in a mood to redo that whole thing. So everything's going to be kind of flow off of the Steam panel, if that makes sense. So let's get this display in, let's get it mounted up, and then we will overlay the Steam panel on top of it and see how much real estate we're working with to the right of it for radios and G5s. Okay. Alright. Our monitor simply comes in, slides up into place, and presses in. Just like that. It is pressure fit. There is sort of a backing behind it, wood backing, but when I cut this out, I cut it small and I sanded it to fit. You don't cut too big. Cut small and sand it to fit. That's what I did. It's got a nice tight fit in there. So that'll work out. The hole just to the left of it that you see here, that is to feed the wires for our Steam panel. Okay. I'm gonna grab some instruments and some controls and just kind of fit them up in there, see what we're looking like. Okay, we have our switch panel here, which I already cut the hole out for that, so we'll get that in. We have our virtual fly throttle prop mixture unit that, because I'm panel mounted, I take it out of the housing. It doesn't come like this. It comes with the housing and everything. But this is the internals of it. Very, very simple. So we'll get that installed. All of this stuff is just getting installed temporarily. Need to see what it looks like. See how much room we have left over for everything else. So we have our switch panel. We have our TPM unit. And we have our flap switch. Our flap switch is a momentary contact. The longer you hold it down, the longer those flaps come down. Same with going up. There's no detents, nothing like that. This is a Foxtrot model, so this is 40 degrees of flaps and prior to detented flaps. These are, if I wanted 3 degrees of flaps, it's not gated. You could do 17, you could do 23. It's just if you hold it down, your flaps are coming down. If you hold it up, your flaps are coming up. The same way in the real plane. So let's go ahead and get these 3 items screwed up into the panel. And then we'll get our steam panel screwed down on top and see what we're looking like. First thing I'm going to do is offer up the magneto switch panel. We'll plug it right in here to this hole. Get it screwed in. At least for the time being, I'm only doing a couple of screws per item because I know they're going to have to come back out. When we go for final installation, everything's going to get screwed down tight and secure. But since we're still mocking everything up, just a couple of screws will be sufficient. We'll take our TPM unit and we'll slide it into place here. Got our switch panel, which should be 3.5 inches, and it is 21.5 up, and it is 21.5 up, and it is. So now my throttle is the exact height from the floor as the real plane. It's the exact distance from the left of the panel as the real plane. My magneto switch is the exact height from the floor of the real plane and the exact distance from the left of the panel as the real aircraft. The sacrifice I needed to make was with the mixture, because our TPM unit actually has a prop control in it as well, so we did have to move the mixture over slightly, but that's, it didn't have to move over enough to cover the flap switch. That was another important thing. I wanted to ensure that my flap switch was the exact distance from the left of the panel and the exact distance up from the floor as the real plane. That way, when I go to reach for that stupid thing, whether I'm in here or whether I'm in the plane, I know exactly where it's going to be at. So we'll offer that up right into here. Just kind of like so. And screw that in. The screws that I'm using to screw the items into the panel are a number 8 by 1/2 inch pan head screw. Alright, so we've got our flap switch, we've got our mixture, we've got our prop, we've got our throttle control. Flap switch. Okay. Anybody know what this is? This is our engine primer. Fully functional, of course, but for purposes of our simulator, this is a GNDN primer. Goes nowhere, does nothing, other than the fact that I can put it in my hand and I can pull it out and move it in 3 or 4 times to prime the engine. It's just something tactile, something to feel, something to put your hands on. Because remember, if it's on my checklist, I want to be able to put my hands on it. Very simple, very, very simple to use. It's got an adjusting nut back here, obviously to adjust the depth of your panel. In the real plane, you have it essentially sucks fuel and squirts fuel. The orifices on this thing are very, very small. I couldn't, like, they're so small you wouldn't even be able to see them on the camera if I hold it up right now. Like, it's very, you might be able to see that. But that's why, when it's cold out, and especially when it's cold out, and I'll show you, you have these O-rings in here, this plunger, and it's literally trying to suck the fuel and then push it into the carburetor. And the colder it is, and these O-rings, they swell, and they just makes it really, really kind of difficult to to prime sometimes. So let's go ahead and fit this thing in to our panel. Okay. And here's our steam panel. I can tell you right now, this notch is not going to be in the right spot. I can guarantee it's going to have to come over here. Which is what we're going to find out. So we'll take this back to the frame and see where I'm going to need to notch this thing for the new yoke location. And then I'm going to have to get creative and figure out how I'm going to plug this area here or do something so where it's not so unsightly since it won't be there anymore. Since that area is not going to be used anymore. Alright. So let's head over there, and I don't know if I'll be able to screw this thing down tonight or not because I don't know if I'm ready or in a position to notch this thing out tonight. But let's see how we're looking. I'll show you a rear view of the back of it. I know some of you have already seen it before. It's kind of a mess. A lot of encoders, a lot of 28 gauge wiring. It all kind of goes down to this central plug here, which plugs into an Arduino Mega board. I tried using duct tape to hold the wires down to the back of the panel, but for this version I might actually try and use a glue gun, hold the wires down and drop some hot glue over it. See if that doesn't do a better job. I've dremeled out the back of this to kind of recess the wires down inside in between the gauges. It was certainly not a couple hour project, that's for sure. But let's at least see if we can't figure out where we can mark this thing for cutting of the yoke shaft. So to bring this over, if I were to use the existing yoke shaft hole, our panel would be way off center. So I'm gonna have to come over this way. And then I'm gonna mark that. Alright. I did mark it. You're not going to be able to see the pencil marks. But I need to make a new notch like right there. So the yoke from the original version came over about 2 inches. It's not the first time this vinyl sticker's been off of here. I I do want to say thank you all for coming in and hanging out for a little bit this evening. I'd like to take you on as much. I'd like to take you on as much of this as possible, but I'm not kidding. There's just so much trial and error, especially on a brand new design like this, that I would rather just do all the trial and error off camera and then just explain to you how I did it, on the on camera. So, I guess, where are we at now? Got that in. We got the primer in. Alternate static air and carb heat switches can go in at a later point in time. I really should probably try and get this panel notched and mounted tonight here. Yeah, let's just do that. I'm going to try and peel some of these stickers off of this thing. The placards that I use are actually FAA approved placard stickers here. And they come from... You can get them from a company called Screaming Arrow Graphics. They're based down in Florida. But they have placards for just about, every sort of Cessna, Piper, Beechcraft variant you can think of. They do have a placard kit for it. So, I think I will. Yep, I'm just gonna do it. Tell you what, I'm gonna take a couple minute intermission and go notch this panel out so that we can mount it onto our panel support panel. I don't even know what to call that thing. But we're gonna go notch out our overlay so that we can overlay it onto the panel. So, give me about 4 or 5 minutes or so out in the garage, and I will be right back with y'all. See you in a minute. Alright, thank you for your patience. I was able to get that panel notched out. So where our yoke shaft used to ride here, it's now going to ride here. Unfortunately, I lost that little sliver there. I don't know, I might get creative. We'll see. We'll just see how it looks once we get it all fitted up in there. So now that we are notched, let's go ahead and get this mounted up to or overlaid onto our panel. And then that will give us an idea as to how much real estate we have to work with for everything else. So let's get this fitted up, shall we? Alright, the hole in the side of the panel is to feed my wiring through. And then it's just a matter of ensuring that our panel is flush to the left and flush on top. We'll give it a bit of screws. More screw. Alright, there is our steam panel fitted up there. That essentially leaves us this for everything else. And just so, let me see here. I may as well just go get all the other equipment and take it out of the other panel, huh? And see if we can't get it to fit over here. This was the original right side of our panel, modular in design. We have our Hobbs meter, our dual G5s, audio panel, 430, comm nav 2, transponder. This is DME and ground speed, transponder, and autopilot. It's going to be tight, but I think we can make it work. But let's just we know we're not going to be utilizing this panel anyway. So let's just go ahead and strip all of this out of here. However, I am going to save this to use as a template for, putting stuff back in there. The Hobbs meter out of there. G5s, they bolt in from behind. And that's the footprint that they leave behind. The 430 and the audio panel come out from, or bolted in from behind. And then the prop wash radio panels, they all bolt from the front, or screw from the front. Transponder, autopilot. DME and ground speed, and common nav 2 radio. That's what's left. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this and put it where the G5s would normally be above the yoke, kind of trace it out, and then see if the radios would fit between that, and I'm not sure if they will. Because we're essentially going from a 46-inch panel down to a 42-inch panel. Right. Okay. That's not gonna fit that way. I'm having a difficult time visualizing it like that. Let me go grab the actual radios. G5 directly above my yoke in whatever fashion. What I want to know is if the radio panel will fit and that's just going to be very tight. Yeah, it's just gonna have to come over some. What I'm finding out is that if I have the G5s directly over the centered over the yoke for the co-pilot, I don't have enough space to mount the radios. If I mount the radios, even if I bring it all the way over as left as possible, G5s are still not gonna quite be where I need them to be. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab this pencil and I'm gonna mark the edge of the panel overlay in the bottom. Because what I want to do now is take this panel back off, and I want to see how much space I have to the left before I hit the monitor. Alright, so we need that screwdriver again. So it would seem that, and I know you can't see the line, it's in pencil, I have about 2 inches between the right side of this monitor and where that gauge panel overlay ended. So theoretically, it would be a kind of very intricate work to do, but if I were to, I could shave at least an inch off the right side of the panel overlay. So if that's the case, if I center this here, and I'm just going to draw a line. So if that's my G5 line here, the real sim gear unit would probably fit. The real sim gear units, the prop wash units, they're a bit too wide to fit in there. So now I'm going to have to decide how I want to arrange this. Let's head back over and we'll chit chat for a minute. So the issues I'm running into is just its width of components. And you know, it all boils down to I cannot stick this yoke shaft through the monitor. If I could do that, then we'd be able to move that gauge monitor over and down, and you know that yoke would go right there just below the directional gyro, and everything would be great. That's just it's not how it's gonna be able to work. Not with what I have currently. You know, I've considered going the Pico projector route. You know, with Pico projectors, you could project those instruments on the back side of the panel using a black screen, and then that would project through. And I guess you could project even around the yoke shaft, but that's not a position I'm in right now. Gonna have to get creative. I may even do away with one of the G5s or move them over. Because we have a DME and ground speed. We have... I probably should have measured that whole radio stack before I took it apart. Dang it. Gonna have to get creative. I haven't thought very far ahead of where I am at now. Yeah, ideally, all of the radios would be the width of the real sim gear audio panel and 430. But the problem is, I mean, it's not a problem. It's a problem for me. It's not a problem. I mean, they're all still good units. You have your real sim gear units here, which measure I think these were about 6 inches wide. Okay, just over 6 inches wide at 6 1/8. And the prop wash units measure 7 1/4. So we got an inch of width on the prop wash units versus the real sim gear. My thought process as of lately was just doing away with the prop wash units altogether, getting a real Sim Gear 650, and then we could have the audio panel, the 650 and the 430. 650 being the COM1 nav one. Now the 650 also has a transponder, so then we would be able to eliminate our transponder radio panel from the mix. Obviously the COM2 and nav2 unit would be replaced with this. So the only, so we would have, that would leave us two 7 1/4 inch panels from prop wash, which ground speed I'm not too concerned with. DME, is nice. VOR flying, and when I was going through the instrument ratings on Pilot Edge and doing the IFR ratings through Boston Virtual, I just decided to go with less GPS and more, slant alpha. So that's why I bought this DME panel. So I'll probably retain it. Because unless with the GNS, with the 430, unless I put that fix in, that VOR fix in, the GPS won't give me DME. It won't give me distance. I mean, I could tune the localizer in here in the nav unit, but that still doesn't necessarily give me DME. So we might retain the DME panel. So that being said, let's just head back there to the cockpit for a minute. Hucker 125, welcome on in. Hello. So okay, this line here is where our panel ends, and I know you can't really see that from there. So if we have even if we brought it all the way to the left, brought it up, and put DME below. No. Actually, I think autopilot would be alright to come over here. It would be nice if... Yeah, I just can't do that. And this is the part of live streaming that I just kind of like... Because from here, now is the thinking part, and... Yeah, the thinking was what takes a while. Thanks, Hawker. I appreciate that. It's coming along decently. The only caveat we've had to make is, our panel is 2 inches taller on the top. Everything below, yoke shafts, mag switch, throttle, flaps, everything there is in the exact location. But because of the limitation of the gauge panel and not being able to stick the yoke shaft through it, our panel is actually 2 inches taller. So we're at a 21.5 inches tall instead of 19.5 inches tall. But it's that's is what it is. So. Yeah. Let's see. Let's see if I can figure out a good way to try and draw this out here. No, that's gonna hinder us. Not gonna be able to trace it. Oh, a 750 for nav and comms, huh? Comes with a hefty price tag, those 750s do. But that would be kind of neat to fit in here. I think the 750 will give you a weather radar and TCAS traffic overlays. So I guess that is a possibility. I mean, the options are limitless. Obviously, your only limit is funding available for said options. I hate to say it, but I think I'm at a point where we're gonna have to kind of stop, and I'm gonna have to think of the next step and whatnot. So, but and the way I do it. The way I'm going to do the next one, as you saw, we have and everything's modular, and I try to do it that way. If something needs serviced, we only have to service a little bit, so this was the right side, this is the left side of our panel. This is our steam gauge, we had to move our yoke over here from here. And the right side of the panel works the same way. Have this overlay here, and the equipment, goes in here, and then it gets screwed to the support panel, which generally has these same holes in it to allow it to pass through. So, I think we're going to have to call it a night for now, because honestly the next step is going to be making a new panel for the avionics for the right side, and we just don't have the time to do that this evening. But I do think that a lot had gotten done. Granted, I did a lot of this earlier, but we got the windows mounted. Our design allows for access to the underlying controls underneath of those displays there. We got the panel mounted, the primer, the switch panel, and TPM and flaps are mounted. the holes are drilled for the carb heat and alternate static, even though they're not installed. The holes are drilled for that. So, our next step, part 5. Thanks, Hawker. I appreciate that. I really do. It's nice now having access to the actual plane too, that I can get more precise measurements off of. So, but that's going to be our next step. So part 5. When I start part 5, I'll have this already cut out to shape. At least cut out enough for. I don't know. I guess I'll just have to figure it out as time goes. But part 5 will discuss what instrumentation we're going to use, what layout, and things of that sort. So we'll finish up the instrument panel on part 5. Maybe not finish up, but at least hopefully get the right side designed and figured out. And then we will move along to the pedestal. And then after the pedestal, we will do the glare shield, which I haven't decided if I'm going to reuse my current one and shorten it, or if we're just going to make a complete new one. You know, if I can repurpose it, that's what I'm planning on doing. But we're not there just yet. So, pedestal, glare shield, and then by that time, hopefully everything will be in to get the seats built. Yeah, we've got seats coming with new slide tracks. The up-down, man, the up-down adjustment. If I wanted that, man, that adds so much expense to that seat build. So, yeah, the Cessna is anywhere between, you can raise the seat. At the lowest point, I measured it about 15 inches, and at the highest point, cranking it up, I measured it to be about 17 inches. I can get some cushions if someone's a bit short. But, to add that up-down height adjustment to the seat tracks, it's about $200 per side. Where I can get just standard slide seat rails for about $30 a side. So, that's something I'm thinking about. Interior door handles are not cheap by any means for the Cessna. However, the older 50, 60, 70 series GM trucks and cars had an interior door handle that looked very, very similar, and that's what we're going to be using. Still need to figure out the armrests and stuff as well, but yeah, I think that's about it for this evening. Yeah, realism is very expensive. I guess I will, since I didn't even discuss that. That was on the plan to discuss this evening. I was thinking about expensive. The air vents. So we had our output tubes. Our inlet tubes showed up. So I'll show you how that worked out. You can see here we have our air vent. Okay. Slides in, slides out. My tubes showed up. They are actual inlet and outlet tubes. There's actually a left and a right, but this allows me to actually, how about that? And then I went and I actually resealed them. You know, the ends on these things were pretty deteriorated, so I had just some old weather stripping laying around. Just wrapped it around the new end here, or wrapped it around the end and shoved it in. Works out well. The inlets, but they were not necessarily cheap by any means, as Hawker pointed out in aviation. But being able to actually push them in and push them in versus simply rotating them up and down, the cost for those two used air intake tubes was, for me, it was worth it. But they were still, $50 a piece, US dollars. And then I think I paid close to $50 for the pair of the outlets a couple years back. So those will be functional now again. They were functional before, but since we didn't have the actual receiver tubes, we could only rotate them up and down. I had used just some PVC piping, but the diameter wasn't quite accurate to be able to push them in all the way. So now we can push them in to actually shut the airflow off, and the way that works is, and we're going to get to this point later. This here is my air vent. This is a 700 cubic foot per minute blower. Hawker 125, I don't even want to know what you paid for actual gauges to convert with stepper motors, because I'm sure that's a pretty penny. This here is a 700 cubic foot per minute blower that I put this ducting on, and when all is said and done, it kind of goes like this, okay, and then it loops back around and goes into my air vents. It actually does work out great. And it works through. It is actually a 110 volt blower, and I don't recommend you do something like what I'm about to tell you what I did unless you have a very good understanding of how electricity works and the dangers associated behind electricity. But what I did to enable my my fresh air vents to work, cabin air is what I label the switch in the airplane. I have an extension cord here. It's just a standard extension cord, 3-prong extension cord. Just know that unused power, unused electricity is always going to return back through the ground path, through neutral. So if your load isn't on, you have a hot. That hot's coming right back through. It's running right back through the neutral wire. Always keep that in mind. It's a 110 volt toggle switch. It's not a 12 volt toggle switch. what I did on the extension cord is I interrupted the neutral wire, not the hot wire. Your hot wire is always going to be, if you've got a polarized plug, your hot wire is your skinnier one. Your neutral wire is the fatter one. It's got the one that's got the tips on it. So interrupt your neutral wire. Leave your hot wire intact. And that's what I did, is I cut the neutral wire. I ran the neutral wire to the switch. Okay. That way, if for some reason, something were to happen, something got exposed, it's only the neutral wire that's exposed, which might only be hot some of the time. So that's what I did. I did it. I used a cheap extension cord because they're cheap, as opposed to cutting into, the conducting of the blower. And that's all I did. I did that, and then I ran this up to the back of the panel. Write a book on it. If only I had the time to do things like that. I love to write. I don't have time anymore. But that's essentially it. Plug this into your wall. Plug your blower into this. Run this to your panel. You want your cabin air on. Boom. Starts blowing that blower. Runs to that ducting, and then it kind of runs to those fresh air vents. And it really it really enhances that feel and that immersion, especially if you accidentally brush your microphone past the blower there. You get that wind noise running through the intercom. So, that's where I'm at. Do it in small increments. Yeah, maybe I will. But that's where I'm at. That's where the project is at currently. I think it's coming along pretty good. I think it looks pretty decent thus far. So yeah, part 5. We'll do some more work on the right side of the instrument panel. And go from there. That is it for me. I do want to thank you all for coming in and hanging out for a bit this evening. And I'm really anxious to get back to flying. I really, really am. But I don't want to rush through this either. I start rushing through things, and then you may not be satisfied with the end result. I want to get it done, but I don't want to rush through it. Let's see who we can go and say hi to for the rest of the evening. I don't know who's flying where. Who's doing what? Let's see. Let's go say hi to... Let's go raid Jeffrey B. I think Jeffrey B is doing one of his Wings Over New England ratings tonight with Boston Virtual, I think. So let's go say hi to Jeffrey B. Until part 5 comes around, which I honestly don't know when that's going to be. Hopefully sometime this week soon. You all take care and stay safe. And it was definitely my pleasure hanging out with you. Have a great evening, and we'll talk to you all later. Hawker, thanks for coming in. Always a pleasure, my friend. Have a great night, everyone.